When you boot up Final Fantasy VIII Remastered, the hope is to get the definitive all-in-one release, a version that dots every I and crosses every T, one that truly delivers the perfect conversion of a classic for a new generation on PS4, Xbox One, PC and Switch. Certainly after 2 decades since its launch on PlayStation 1, this game is unique. It's conspicuous for being the last of that era to get any form of HD treatment. The work put into Final Fantasy VIII Remastered though, as handled by developers .emu and Access Games, clearly points to a challenging porting project. While it's a thrill to see it return to the spotlight, it's not everything it could be, and as much as the remaster work takes steps in the right direction, there are points which are, sadly, a step back from the PlayStation original. First up, let's talk about the impact this game had in 1999. Off the back of the huge success of Final Fantasy VII, developer Squaresoft aimed for a follow-up that matched the series' newfound blockbuster status. Simply put, it took what worked on the last game, but pushed it to greater heights. Those beautiful FMVs returned, for example, but this time, pre-rendered scenes integrated closely with state-of-the-art 3D modelling. It's an idea FF7 toyed with at points, but it's used far more extensively in 8 to give a cinematic presentation. The Dorrit mission, for example, was used to demo the game ahead of release, an incredible set piece involving a mech crab chasing Squall through the streets. It meant we got visuals far beyond what PS1 hardware could ever realistically do in real time, by brute force of filling 4 CDs with those cutscenes. FF8's action scenes dovetailed between high-grade in-engine 3D models and encoded movies, often mixing both in a way that was unprecedented on console. The result? Some of the most memorable visuals on PS1. It's an incredible feat of technology for its day, but it pushed the boat out in many other ways too. The score used high quality sampling on PS1 with a focus on recorded vocal tracks. The engine also ran with high polygon character models for its main cast, meaning Squall, Rinoa and Cypher appear in battle with the same model as traversal segments. Also, that large, intruding battle window of Final Fantasy VII, which took up a good chunk of the screen's lower half, is removed. Instead, the entire frame shows the 3D action, overlaid with a transparent HUD for HP. Going from one to the other in the late 90s, it's a huge technical improvement. There are 3 huge advantages to playing the remaster, the first being that all character and enemy models get an HD reworking. The new designs for Squall, the Guardian Force summons, and everything in between look clean and far easier on the eye. It's more consistent with the FMV renders. In fact, you'll catch details that were easy to miss otherwise, like the stitching on clothes or the scar on Squall's face. If we switch between the PS4 remaster and the original PS1 game, it's hard to see any real negatives to the change. It's exactly what we wanted, and arguably from Final Fantasy VII's remaster too. Secondly, we have the boosters. With a click of the analog sticks, you can speed the game up by 3 times, turn off random encounters, or even increase HP and limit breaks. It's a bit of a cheat on the surface, but it's become a routine extra for Final Fantasy remasters, even FF12, to help with the grind of long dungeons. Often you'll settle on an attack pattern that just needs repeating over and over, so that 3 times speed up is especially great for blitzing through the repetition. It's a big plus point over the original game, and gets you to the heart of what makes these games fun. Resolution is the third point. Okay, here we have the original PlayStation version running on PS3 through emulation. That gets us a 320 by 240 image with borders, but upscaled here to 1080p. Dithering is an issue playing this way. The colour depth is low, much like most full 3D titles of the era. Moving to the remaster then, running here on base PS4, we get a native 1920 by 1080 picture. PS4 Pro users meanwhile get no 4K presentation at all, and 1080p is all it's pushed to there. Still, 1080p benefits anything rendered in real-time 3D, from the characters to the battle sequences and the world map. Plus, the remaster also removes those dithering artifacts for a much cleaner picture. Now, there are some big drawbacks here obviously. We still have a 4:3 aspect ratio with borders for starters, but that's expected given the nature of the assets. More pressing is the fact that all the original backdrops and cutscenes are still very low quality, with only a smoothing filter added. For comparison, I'm running the PS1 original with no filter, and the remaster on PS4 does clean up some rough spots, and certainly compression isn't as aggressive on FMVs for example. It's an improvement, but it's still not quite enough. This all scales to 1080p more effectively, but those backdrops otherwise look as they did 20 years ago on PC. The effect is jarring to have high quality character models running over the top of essentially a blurry soup-like environment. A smart AI upscaler would have been brilliant here to reinterpret the frame for a cleaner picture, but instead we have to make do. That's the pre-rendered side, but what of the 3D areas in battle and the world map? Well, the bad news is these all go untouched in terms of the core asset work. The world map, for example, all 3D modeling and texturing is presented in a 1080p window with proper texture filtering. Already it cleans the image up massively compared to PS1. However, the actual texture mapping around Balam Garden, the floor, the animated textures on water are as they were on PS1. Those texture maps are in plain view now, and you can see the poor alignment between them, better than ever at this resolution. Seeing as the character models are swapped out for high quality versions, it's a shame the world map at least didn't see similar treatment. It just sticks out like a sore thumb. This is similar territory to Final Fantasy VII's remaster. The mismatch between models and the pre-rendered backdrops was obvious then, but the issue is simply more glaring in the Final Fantasy VIII remaster because of those model upgrades. The gap in quality is that much wider. We can fairly assume the developers didn't have the original source artwork for this once again, which would have helped. Here it means re-rendering at a full 1080p wasn't an option, and it's relying on assets plucked straight from PS1 or PC versions of the day. Indeed, based on early impressions of the remaster on PC, evidence suggests all consoles are running a decompiled version of the original PC edition released in 2000, likely with an x86 emulator. And it'd explain a lot. Pressing start boots you into an instance with the Squaresoft logo, and it plays out with so many of the quirks of the PC release. This is where we see the 8 remaster take some backward steps from PS1. Firstly, there are no analog controls. It's just like the PC version, which relied on keyboard arrow keys, giving you only 8 directions of movement, even if you're using PS4's analog sticks. The PS1 version, by comparison, gave you fine 360-degree gradients of control on the DualShock controller. It meant it was much easier to line up an NPC and talk to them or use the draw points. As it is here though, you end up walking around kind of like a robot. Equally, rumble is entirely missing from this version, and so you don't get feedback during scrolls limit breaks. In some respects, maybe just emulating the PS1 version would have given us a better time here, but yes, analog movement and rumble are cut out completely. The idea we can't get a perfect rendition of Final Fantasy VIII here is really disappointing. Then again, there are at least some plus points to using the PC code. The menu text is clear and sharp, subtle touches like the fake dynamic depth of field in towns is maintained, and overall it's faithful to the way the PC version played out all those years ago. An extra advantage is that loading times are improved, with smoother fade to black transitions between areas compared to PS1. The soundtrack also, thankfully, uses the PS1 version, rather than MIDI synths we had on PC. This works properly too. It resumes properly on the field after a battle, rather than restarting the track, which was a problem with other FF remasters, so all good there. Performance is something worth touching on. For context, the PS1 had a very unique setup with Final Fantasy games. It was the early days of 3D on console, and that often meant 30fps really was a luxury, and you often accepted it as a compromise to get cutting edge visuals. For a game pushing the envelope as much as FF8, that meant running with hard framerate caps, based on the situation. So for example, you get 30fps for traversal on the world map or towns, but battle scenes are capped at 15fps. Obviously, since the action is turn-based in nature, it never really affects the strategic element. The key bit here is that the menus running over the top of the action run at 60fps anyway on PS1, which meant the limit break indicators panned smoothly across the screen. The remaster then, what's changed? Well, it seems performance is worse overall. The hard framerate ceiling still works as before, it runs at 30fps while travelling around, and there's no real push to anything higher. In battle though, there's a subtle change, a 16fps cap on the 3D rendered parts for the screen, 1fps higher than PS1. The twist here is, menus now no longer run at 60fps, but sync right up to the 3D action. So supposing you're in battle then, menus update in sync at 16fps along with the gameplay. And unfortunately, this does affect playability. Limit attacks like Squall's Renzo Kuken rely on timing and R1 press to a set rhythm. Having that refresh slower simply makes it more difficult to time. If you've already noticed added input delay on menus in the remaster, then this is part of the reason why. It runs at a quarter of the frame rate. Needless to say, running the boosters bumps that refresh up higher. It was like this on the original PC version as well, gameplay synced to the menus. Having different on-screen elements run out of sync was a feature of the PS1 hardware, and that didn't make it across the PC at the time. So it follows that's how this remaster works too. Final Fantasy VIII remains an incredible game to play today. There's no way to dress this up as a pure upgrade, of course. The frame rate is worse than PS1, we're missing analog controls, rumble support is gone, and the visual upgrade isn't consistent. The main advantage of playing this remaster is the boosters, which are nice additions. Thankfully, the beautiful art direction and soundtrack hold up really well despite the limitations of the time. The triple triad card minigame is as addictive as ever, and in terms of sheer world building, it's full of charming small details that make up a great whole. Technically, Final Fantasy VIII is clearly a pioneering effort for its use of animated backdrops. Those FMVs combined so effectively with the in-engine modelling at a time when 3D on console was still in its infancy. For all the flaws of this remaster then, it's worth checking out just to see how Squaresoft pushed PS1 technology after FF7. We're not dealing with the perfect port by any means. It's really frustrating we can't have it all in one package. As a project that's been a long time in gestation though, we do at least now have a better idea of the challenges Square Enix faced to make it happen at all. If, and only if, you can accept all the shortcomings I've mentioned, the remaster at least gives an easy way to play one of the biggest budget JRPGs of its era. But that's all for today. If you did find this analysis useful or insightful in any way, please let me know with a like or subscribe. And don't forget to hit the bell to get notifications as any new video lands. To get this video at source file quality, check out our Patreon at digitalfoundry.net, and to get in touch with me or the team directly, just use Twitter. But from me for now, thanks for watching.